Okay, today we have a very comprehensive video that's going to cover the patch notes for 7.2. Previously, we had a video discussing what I think should be balanced for 7.1. Let's see. Let's see what's included. So skimming over this, we have Seize nerfs, Fire nerfs, Lich nerfs. Lich isn't going to heal from towers anymore. Seize is gonna have like different mechanics for I guess walking on water where you can damage them and sink them potentially, and Dive has recharge. I think this is fantastic. So these are great changes. Sky Castle's no water. I think that makes sense. Dark Fortress was revamped and also has no water. I think that's good. SS Portal Grabbing was changed. I think this is okay. I don't really care too much. Go ahead, nerf it. I will say it's still possible if you use a Spirit or if you use a Swarm. So I have another video on that. Check that out. Thundershock, whatever. Glide, whatever. Retribution. This only really makes sense to activate if you plan to rush someone or go aggro on someone like from the get-go. I think it's okay. I think it's fine. Clams, that's whatever. The tower thing is going to affect double tower types of books. I think that's okay. I think overall it's healthy, especially for newer players. Newer players might not necessarily have the core meta spells or well-rounded books to be able to take on a lot of towers. It's probably good for new players. Although this does seem like a complex description, is one thing Pure needs to work on. You need to work on how you articulate this effect is reduced by 10% each turn. Like, it's too much math, bro. Like, this is way too much math. You need to figure out, maybe put it into ChatGPT somehow. How do I articulate this a little better? Like, I don't want to think too much. I don't want to think about the math and whatnot. And that's me. Imagine like a brand new player. Redo for full cogs, that's whatever. Ice Bomb turn 6, this kind of helps. It's something. I think it's not bad. I support the Flight and Glide till turn 4. I think it makes games a lot more creative, personally speaking. And if you look at games like chess, for instance, they'll have, sometimes 7, sometimes 14, sometimes even more turns of setup essentially before they even take a piece, right? Even the most aggro styles, they're gonna have like a few turns of setup before you start taking any pieces. In Arcanist, you can really start, taking pieces in the sense that like you're taking HP away from the other player from turn 1 or turn 0 rather. I think just having at least one turn in Arcanist where you might not, or even if you go aggro, it's not like crazy damage aggro. I think that's a good thing. Or if you do decide to go aggro, there's counterplay. So even if you decide to go aggro, let's say with Glide, you pebble shot somebody turn 1 after a tower, they'll be able to flash you off, and now it's like you get to the gate back. And if you really want to like keep going at him, take Santa's Magic or something. If your gate is that important to you, right? Now we have a little bit more balanced types of rush or aggro books rather than just taking extreme rush, which can be just as annoying as like any other extreme variant of books. Whisperer turn 4, this makes no sense whatsoever. It's not a nerf, a buff, whatever. It's not anything because Whisperer was oftentimes used as a closer spell. I think this is actually like useless. I think Whisperer is good at closing, and you don't want to just kind of burn one from the get-go oftentimes. So yeah, I don't get that. Now Pegasus is one I'm going to talk more in depth about. The Forest Seed change, I don't like it just because I think this is a very much skill issue type of spell you play around, but if it helps new players, so be it. I think it does help though to have Forest Seed against stuff like Shock Shield, right? Where it can buy you one turn against a shock shield user. So I think, it's good. Now, not initial cast is still going to be fine, but thereafter, you're going to get diminishing returns with it. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So on the 6th forest seed, it's really nothing. On the 5th forest seed, you can kill it with a swarm or something. And yeah, I mean, instead of just this decrementation, maybe just do like 75, and then maybe like keep it at 50 or something. I don't know, but I don't think it needs a nerf, frankly speaking. But I'm okay with it either way. I don't think it's like that major of a deal. I think your first forest seed matters a lot. Your second forest seed also matters quite a bit. And they should have enough HP. Thereafter, it's mostly used, I think, trapping and whatnot. But yeah, I think at the top level of Arcanist, there's plenty of counterplay against forest seed. It's well documented counterplay against forest seed, particularly with how you use gate, how you use BFTP, and how you get out of it in a turn efficient manner so that they're not draining you after or whatever. But I could definitely see like in the mid level to lower levels it being annoying. Herd mentality, I think that's good nerf. Swarm, we have already tried this nerf. I mean, we've tried it and like the game didn't flourish or anything from it. I think Swarm is at 2 it's great, especially for LTS. At least keep it for LTS if you really push through with this, because it does make LTS very, very much more interesting, more strategic, more multi-dimensional. I think having 2 there is good. I know there's a couple high-rated players that would just stop playing, but we can't just cater to them. But yeah, I think personally it won't affect me too much, but since we do have other alternatives, we have Acorn, we have Boars, we have Myth, we have all these turn efficient ways to break stall nowadays that we didn't in the past. So that kind of changes the equation where like before Swarm was the only game in town for like breaking stall. I think just keep it as it is. I haven't even seen anyone really petition for it, unless you really just want to try to take Swarm out of the meta, in which case, that's on you. I said, let's go through the additions first. Sand, I actually don't think is going to change too much for HTS. For LTS, I think it could, for sure. I think there could be some interesting LTS mixes. Test server fixes. What else? Arcane glyphs properly collide. Caster upon casting. Balance. Arcane glyph has a 5-turn CD. This is great. Lich will only deal a third of the damage they deal to others instead of half. This is really great. Wow. This is a huge nerf to Lich. Does not get infinite prots. That's cool. Autumns will be removed upon friendly contact. And to instantly far. That's a typo. Prickly Barrier will deactivate upon friendly contact. Wow. That's a huge snare nerf. This is a huge snare nerf because oftentimes you'll just like snare close to you where you're at. So now you can't even do that anymore. Whoa. This is a huge snare nerf. Humongous. This will like really... I think snare's in a great spot, but this is like major nerf. I don't think it's necessary. Anything here I should care about? Lava. Blah, 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 blah. Shining power will fall when taking damage. Ooh, that's a huge overlight nerf. That's a huge overlight nerf. Shining power. Wow, that's actually big. prickly barrier desync for spectators. Thank you. Wow. These are like bug fixes. Okay, so really like the problematic flowbooks overlaid C's and Lich really getting nerfed hard with respect to their healing, um, their ability to just kind of like stay in one spot and not do anything with overlight. C's, wow, which I think is great. Don't get me wrong. And I said I would talk about Pegasus more in depth. So I've seen some people complain about Pegasus nerf. Personally, I don't think it's for my playstyle. I'll give my 2 cents. This is just for me. For my playstyle, 4 pegs makes no difference. The reason 4 pegs makes no difference is that I play flightless books, and I think this will affect flight books to an extent. Particularly their late game, they'll be slightly nerfed, like the very generic flight SS peg mixes you see. They will be slightly nerfed for sure, but in terms of like a lot of flightless books that might just take peg and only peg, yes, they'll be somewhat nerfed for sure, but my books won't. So I'll go through this with you guys. So I'll take a look at this book. And this book's done quite well for me. It's one I've been playing around. You can take out Frost Shards and Mech Arrow for like Rain of Fire, Rain of Arrows. But essentially, having a spell like Monarchs, and this is because we have all these new spells, we can afford to nerf some OG spells. Having spells like Monarchs, it gives spells like Pegs and Breathing Room. You don't necessarily need to depend on your Pegs as much. You can depend on your Monarchs to kind of maneuver around the map if you need to, or sustain yourself, right? In some cases, having Monarchs can sustain you better than a Peg can, and also it gives you amazing utility. Now, so for books like this, it's not really too much affected. It doesn't really affect things whatsoever. There are some books. So this is a book some players like. This is a very like Falcos-esque type of book here, right? Just the classic DK, Peg, Swarm. You have like spells like this. I don't think he's notoriously not a huge fan of aerials, at least from my experience playing him. He likes Totem. Maybe he'll take this spell, maybe he won't. But this is a very like Falcos-esque type of book. In this situation, I do think the 4 peg thing will affect him. He'll definitely have to change up a book like this, simply because by like, I want to say turn, let's say 40 or so, he won't be able to summon pegs anymore. And the way that he likes to play oftentimes, and I use him as an example because I've seen he's very outspoken on some discussion forums. So I'm just, that's why I'm using him his playstyle as an example here, to give the counter argument. By like turn 40 or so, what he likes to do is he likes to essentially go ahead and charge up his DK sometimes, maybe like build up advantage with like Swarm, DK, whatever, get top control with these kind of spells, although this one's getting a nerf too, and essentially just maybe DK, you get a DK up to like 200 HP or give or take. He plays kind of like in that manner. Sometimes he'll take Gargoyle with it too. Now granted, I think if you take any other minion besides like, let's say just Peg, let's say you take another kind of like WinCon minion, whether it be Trolls, whether it be Boars, whether it be Gargoyle, I think you will be okay with the 4-peg limitation. But if you take a book like this, I think the 4-peg limitation will kind of hit your books, and you will have to change up your books slightly, right? Like he may have to put in another WinCon type of minion, so he might have to put in Boar, he might have to put in maybe a Miner or something, just to take those turn CDs off of the peg and instead put it on another minion. Yeah, and that's gonna, or he would have to finish the games earlier, but oftentimes that's not maybe to the play style that he's playing towards if he's going for like a turn 50 win. So that's the counter argument, right? I will say, I think personally, like if you take this book, I don't think 4 pegs matters. If you take, what other books do I have a peg? This one, you have Storm Dragon. I don't think the 4 pegs matter. This one, it's a popular book. It's with trolls. I think 4 pegs, you might use peg more here, but you do also have trolls that can help take kind of like those turn cycles away from you. So I think this book will be slightly nerfed, where you might not be able to get that 5th Pegasus out, but I'm not exactly sure how much. So I could see myself by like turn 45, 50 being out of pegs. But and I say turn 45, 50, if this book didn't have trolls, it'd probably be more like turn 30, right? So yeah, some books with peg, if this peg nerf goes through, they will have to adjust. They'll have to take another minion, whether that be monarchs or trolls or boar or like something else. But some of these generic books will have to change, and that's really the argument there. That's really where I think it's coming from. The golden book, my favorite book from this last patch, yes, this will actually be nerfed a little bit for sure. I think in terms of just, if the 1 swarm limit goes through, that's for sure going to nerf it. 100% it's going to nerf it. Obviously, Portal SS sinks are nerfed somewhat. You're going to have to set up with Spirit or Swarm to pull that off. Personally, I'm probably going to be running more flightless books, kind of like this, next patch. But yeah, I think this book is not going to be as strong anymore, given all the relative nerfs, and you probably will run out of peg by turn, I want to say like maybe 35, 40. I could see yourself running out of pegs, and then you're going to have to rely more on like Storm Spirits or other means to kind of like gain control, and hopefully you've established some sort of like stall or like some sort of control by like turn 40 where that's not an issue. But if you haven't and you're kind of still going back and forth or 50-50, the player that has, let's say, another quality minion set up, maybe like with this book, maybe they have like monarchs per se and they have more pegs available to them, they're going to be at like a slight advantage, right? And I think going into next patch, if these changes go through, flightless books will definitely be slightly stronger than flighted books. Just in general, like generally speaking, I think that's still true this patch. If I'm being honest, I think flightless books, at least like on HTS perspective, are definitely stronger. And then when you go to LTS, definitely like flightless books aren't it in many cases, just because of the low time. With some exceptions like Dark Fortress, right? Now, how these changes will affect, let's say, elementals. I mean, you have so many different spells to cover, let's say 4 use Pegasus or something like that, or like you have so many different openers you can do besides just like flight and mudball somebody like in an elementals game early on, which I've seen is like one of the most common openers, which I think is healthy for the game. I think majority of these changes aren't bad at all, but they will invalidate slightly, right, some playstyles. And they, like, let's say a book like this, right, it's going to invalidate this type of book in some ways, where like if this book doesn't have control by like, let's say turn 40, 45, it's kind of rough, right? You're not going to be able to stall out some games that otherwise you might have been able to. And especially if this nerf goes through, I think, you're going to have to run a different type of book, man. Like, you're going to have to adjust. But if you take a book like this, I think pegs absolutely matter in books like this, but maybe with boars. This is very similar to the troll book, but I actually don't know if this book is like very tried and true tested, but it would take some relief off of peg. These books, I ran them for the memes, but they're actually going to be stronger. I think mid-range books are going to be a little bit stronger going into next patch. So that's something to keep an eye out for. I think definitely try your hand at some mid-range books. They're not going to be able to stall as well as they might have been able to in the past, unless they run something like, I think, well-rounded like this. I really love this book, and I really am liking Portal outside of just SS portal grabbing. But books like this, I feel like you can kind of maneuver around not having Peg or not having 5 Pegasus, in some senses, just because you have like Dwarf, you have alternative minions you can make plays with, although this would be slightly nerfed too. These are all like any book that's like core minion is like Pegasus and doesn't have like, let's say let's say you took out Miner from this book, this would be like a pretty nerfed book in some senses, right? Like you would have to maybe take some more aggro spells and try to like end the game earlier, so you'd have to think about the game a little different. I think some books like this, if you're running like Garg or something, the Peg nerfs don't really affect you much. Yeah, books like this are gonna be like fantastic, no matter what. So like, and you know, as a flightless player, I'm very different than, I want to say, you know, the other flightless players, like the other top players in how they play flightless on HTS. So, and just like in the game in general, I think even on LTS, I'm like, my style is very different than a lot of players, a lot of other top players. So personally, I'm not affected too much by the 4 peg change, but I wanted to give the argument for both sides and kind of articulate how the changes will affect which books. And I don't think it's like gonna break the game or like anything dramatic, despite what you might hear, but it will force certain books to have to adjust, ever so slightly, right? And some people don't like adjustment, and that's totally valid, right? Like, I think most people don't like adjustment, to be honest with you. Whether on Arcanist or like in real life, like most people just don't like change. They just want to, you know, run their routine and just kind of get good at it. Books like this, you know, this book has Peg too, but it also has Dryad, it has Monarchs. Have 4 pegs will never be an issue with a book like this, right? But there are some books, like I articulated earlier, where, you know, maybe with this book you would run through like 6 Pegasus on a normal game today, and not having that is like, okay, well, I don't have my Pegasi, I'm gonna have to take a different spell. Maybe I'll have to take, you know, Monarchs. Maybe I'll have to take like a drone or something. Maybe I'll have to take something. And you know, some people say like, well, Pegasus is there's no good replacement just because, you know, nothing else is just unkillable and it's like good for rush. Well, like the 4 Pegasus will get you through that phase, right? I think the nerfing really comes in when you get to like that turn 35 plus range, right? That's when you're like, okay, I need a 5th peg. If you've been spamming it off CD, more or less, when it's opportune to do so. So yeah, I think some books might take slight hits, some books won't. Now, one argument is like, okay, what books does it open up? I'm not sure that nerfing it opens up necessarily any new books, but I know there's a lot of like new players that have expressed sentiment about, and like mid-level players that have expressed sentiment about Peg being overpowered or whatever. I think that's where the Peg changes come from. It's really like the newer crowd and some voices on some of our discussion forums. So I think you know, if, and I don't think they're necessarily right or wrong. You know, it's just like a matter of taste, right? A matter of taste of like what kind of book should be viable and what shouldn't be. So there's that. I talked a lot about Peg because it is a big change, but hopefully these changes can be carried out correctly, and overall, I think this can be a pretty cool patch, if I'm being honest. I think a lot more emphasis should be given on stuff like spell descriptions, like um, however, it will no longer be infectious after 5 turns regardless. Full blood. Like, I think you could revamp a lot of these spell descriptions just to be more clear and concise. Reflects 33% of damage. Will come. Unlike Sands, I will say, I think the particles should be a little bigger for sure. 100% the particles should be a little bigger because like right now if there's like a tiny little gap open, like all that sand comes and hits you. I think you may as well not say like up to 75 damage, up to 50 damage because it's going to hit you anyways, as long as it taps you. I think the Sands book isn't going to change the meta too much outside of LTS as it is right now. Beyond that, I mean, let me see if there's any lasting thoughts before I wrap up this video. No, I mean, I think the game's in a cool spot. Just spell descriptions, man. Just like having some sort of like formalized bullet points maybe, and just kind of listing them a little better, I think is useful. Like let's say for Aura of Decay, like this damage will turn anything it kills into a zombie under your control. Instead of saying anything, just say anything, and then like maybe put like an exception, like that's not arcane, right? Like because you can't turn arcane minions into a zombie, right? And these kind of changes are easy to do, in my opinion, and like very high priority for Pure, because it actually will help people that to like learn the game without having to, you know, jump in and like play firsthand and then be like, oh, what the hell? I thought this worked differently. We've seen complaints about that with like spells like Harmony, where like it's just kind of too complex, and we're heading in the wrong direction with like spells like Tree. Like this is so complex, man. Like what the hell? There's so much like math that you have to do now, and like the double tower thing, like it's not intuitive. I don't think that should go through, but you know, if it helps the noobs, if anything, just make it so like, what's the change again? It was like the tower thing will reduce your max hit points. At least like tell the user, like when they're hovering over their tower, or like if they take 2 towers in their book, maybe have like a little warning sign. Like you need better user, I think you really need a better UI, better user experience for like how everything works. This game's so complex, man. It's like kind of looking at a Bloomberg terminal. There's just so many things going on, and a lot of us that have been here for a while, we're like accustomed to it, but a lot of people just aren't, you know? Like Dark Knight, like just say it does 250 damage. Like I don't even see that, right? And another unintuitive thing, it's like, okay, if you right click the spell, you could see like the spells the minions have. But if you don't know that you have to right click it, you will never know. You're just clicking on it, like left clicking it, right? It's like, at least make a little hover like bar that says, hey, you know, right click this. Like right click to see more options. Well, like actually you do see that. You see right click to see this minion spells. You see it on the blue at the very bottom under the spell description. But I would just put that like maybe inside the box here, right? Just these little designs, man, and use AI or whatever. Just like copy and paste pictures of this and like throw it to AI and ask it for advice. But do something, man. This stuff matters probably more than balance for retention. But anyways, that's my balance review. I think it's a cool patch. And yeah, hopefully we get it right. There's pros and cons to everything, but you know, I think some will adapt, some won't, like always. So thanks for watching, guys.